say thank you very much, Nick, for inviting us into your club. And before I say anything, I want to tell you that I'm very impressed with Denby Dale and what they're doing here on a weekly basis online. It's coincidentally what we started to do 2.5 years ago when we started our club, and we thought that the future of ham radio would really be using more online presentations and online meetings. And why did we think that? Well, first of all, it's not always easy to have a brick and mortar facility, especially when you're starting up a brand new club. It's costly, and where do you find one that's convenient to all your membership? And then on the other side of the coin, as we all know, amateur radio is graying. I got a haircut recently after 3 months, but I'm no exception to the rule. And a lot of people are not comfortable driving at night or driving long distances, and therefore amateur radio club meetings have been waning. So what's the best idea to get everybody online and to reach everybody on an equal footing is Zoom. When we started mentioning Zoom, I never used the word Zoom because people thought I'd be talking about a motorcycle. But now Zoom has become a common word in everyday vernacular, and that's great. So I think, really my hat's off to you and the lineup that you have every week. I know it takes a lot of work to get people on the show, Nick, and then to get everybody organized. So I think that's great. So that's a little segue into our club. I also wanted to say it's very nice to see some members from our club that are in the meeting here tonight. Besides Jim, on your end of the pond, there's Rachel and Charlie just joined this week. Thank you, Charlie. And then I'm pleased to see Jim W6JIM from also the West Coast is in today. And he's also one of our newer students, so maybe he can say a few words if he feels like it later on. Okay, so the way I thought we would do the presentation today is I would talk about how the Long Island CW Club got started and what we're all about. And then we'd segue into what I think are the common concerns of people that are learning and using Morse code. And that'll be the second part of our presentation. And then we'd very much like to open it up to questions because, we all hear ourselves talk all the time, me and Jim, but we don't get the opportunity to talk to too many people from the UK about their issues on learning and wanting to learn CW. So it's really more important to listen than it is to talk. So I think we'll be presenting maybe for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then really would like to hear what's going on your end. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you could go to the first slide, Jim. How did we get started with the Long Island CW Club? How did this all start? Well, about 2.5 years ago, after a contest in the United States we call Field Day, which was just a couple of weekends ago, where everybody goes out into the field with portable operation setups, we felt that there was really a shortage of CW operators. Everybody on Long Island was looking for CW operators. And why? Because in that particular contest, you get 2 points for every CW operator, QSO rather, as opposed to sideband. And we figured, well, maybe we could give back to the community, the ham radio community in Long Island, and start a club where we could teach. So my friend Rich, K2UPS, and I, we called the club the Long Island CW Club because we figured out we'd get 20 or 30 people from Long Island, and then we would teach. Well, to give you the current numbers, even this, which we updated last week, is now short on membership. Our membership now is approaching 720 this week by the time I induct everybody. We're still at 15 countries. We have 31 teachers. We have 37 classes per week on Zoom, going up to 38 next week. For adults, we have 10 classes per week for kids. We teach kids that are in lockdown because of the virus situation ever since March. We have about 75 kids from the United States and Europe grades kindergarten through 12th grade. And we have, after 3 months, a number of them on the air. And this month, including my 17-year-old daughter, they're going to be taking their technician license tests. They're studying right now for their first ham radio license. We have 8-year-olds and 11-year-olds on the air doing QSOs. It's remarkable. So besides the brick and mortar, besides the online classes, our club also in good times has brick and mortar activities. We really try and get everybody out and about. We have monthly QRP outings. We go to museums. We go to special events. We operate on Marconi Day as a group next to some Marconi sites that are on Long Island. There's a fireboat on Long Island that's very historic that we operate from. So we try and operate like a regular club, but our membership is actually internationally. And anything that we can do in a brick and mortar situation, we have online at the same time. For example, this weekend, the club is going to build a QRP antenna and matching network. Originally, we were going to have that in a facility like we did last year, but with the lockdown, we can't get together. So we're doing the thing entirely online, and we have about 50 club members that are going to do this build, led by an instructor on Saturday online. Okay, so I've told you about the current membership count. Our estimates are that we're poised to grow to at least 1,000 by the end of the year. We're taking in about 20 members a week now. Now, how did we get to this point? We've done a lot of work on social media. We've been on many ham radio podcasts and YouTube channels. In fact, some people well known to you, very interesting people and kind people, the ICQ people, invited us on their show last year. And we did a show with Martin Butler. And that actually, and I was hoping that he was going to be here today, Nick, Steve, M1 ACB of RSGB, we had, myself and him, we had a very interesting back and forth on the future of amateur radio clubs and their survival. And I wrote him an email, and he actually paraphrased that email and put it in the RSGB magazine. And we got some members off that too, so that was very kind of him. Okay, so our classrooms, we don't have to spend time on this. They look very much like what you're doing here, led by an instructor. Most of our instructors are homegrown from the very beginning, learners of CW like Jim. We'll have Jim speak a little bit about his experience when we finish this. We'll go to the next slide, Jim. I've already told you about all the different classes we have. As far as quantity goes, we have beginners classes, which we divide in two parts, which we call a beginners 1 and a beginners 2. Beginners 1 will have the first 20 characters of the 40 characters that we teach. We teach in the Koch order of letters. It's not A, B, C, D, E. The Koch order of letters is made by this gentleman Koch, a scientist, a certain order of letters so that you would find it harder to memorize and count the dots and dashes. And besides beginners classes, we have intermediate, we have sending classes, we have classes to increase speed, classes to get you over certain humps and plateaus of problems that people experience after 10 or 11 words a minute. We teach head copy. We have live on-the-air QSO classes, which is also another class that I teach. For example, let's say we're on 40 meters and we hear an English station and everybody in the class can hear him on their HF radio and on Zoom at the same time. Let's say they can't copy that because their CW is not that good, but they can send well enough, and maybe the guy is a little too fast. I will do the decoding. I will tell that student when to transmit and what he said and when to go. We teach timing, and the protocol of a QSO, and we get people on the air like this very quickly. And as soon as they get over the fear of making their first QSOs, we find that they're ready to do this on their own. And this class really breaks the ice and shows them how to do that. Besides the various classes, which are listed on the left, we have presentation series every month on different topics, just like you. We've been doing this now for 2.5 years. I think we've had 33 different presentations so far. And we've expanded the club to help teach CW to women. It's very important to us to include women and youth in the club because that's the future of ham radio, to diversify and get younger and different type of people in the club. We have 40 women in our YL only class, which is Saturday night. The women name their YL class YL4, number 4, CW. I know that Rachel's been in that, and maybe she can say something about it later too. I hope Charlie will come in this Saturday. And they're completely in control of their content, and they're also, of course, full members in the club and welcome to come into the mainstream adult classes. So on the right, you'll see some of the various presentations we've done. Next slide, please, Jim. I've talked about teaching the homegrown kids. I like that picture. Next, Jim. I've also jumped ahead of myself. I love this photo. This is done by, this print is done by John Falter. On our website, you can actually see the photograph of the woman he copied into this particular recruitment photo of portrait from 1943 in World War II. It's absolutely stunning. Okay, so this particular slide here, how does somebody join the Long Island CW Club? They come to our website. By the way, our website is chock full of information on CW. If you have a few hours, you can go through this. It has the history of CW, many different types of photos, all types of videos, historical videos. There's videos from Hollywood, where we have Eleanor Powell, who was a famous tap dancer in the 1940s, tap dancing Morse code in front of the comedian Red Skelton, all the way up to modern day CW in the movies and in comedy. We have nice historical photos. There's actually a photo of the inside of one of the RAF bombers in World War II that shows a guy sending CW. And the website can keep you entertained for hours. And part of that website also has a membership page where if you come in and you want to join, you send me an email on the page there, and I will answer you within 24 hours and tell you how to join. There is a donation fee, $30 for the first year, $50 for the second, $70 for the third. Most people go for lifetime for $90, and that gives you full rights to do everything into the club and come and go as you please. There are no pressures to take certain classes at certain times. There's no regimen. We strive for our students to have fun with CW because if you're not having some fun with CW, we know Netflix is right across the room, and that will captivate you very quickly. Okay, Jim, I think that was that. Jim, I've talked quite a bit. Why don't you pull up, please, the next slide, next presentation, and maybe you say a few words about how you got started with the club and how you became a teacher.
Jim, you've muted yourself. You just need to unmute again.
There we go. I'm just trying to get the next slide lined up here. Here we are. Okay, well, just a little bit about me. I joined the club last year. I think it was February 2019. because I knew I had been out of CW and out of Morse code or out of ham radio in general for about 10 years. You know how sometimes life gets in the way and we have to take a break for a while. But coming back in, I knew the characters fairly well, but I had forgotten all the protocol and the back and forth, and I was just afraid to get on the air. I just had this fear had built up in me, and I didn't want to get on the air and make a mistake. I couldn't remember how to start I remembered how to send CQ, but I couldn't remember the back and forth and how to end it. So I found the club after seeing it advertised on a YouTube channel, Ham Radio Crash Course, and joined right away. And from then on, I just took as many classes as I could. It really spun me back up to where, increased my knowledge again to far beyond where I had left off 10 years prior. And then about 6 months later, Howard asked me if I'd start teaching some courses with the club, and I said, of course, I was very happy to be able to give back and help others. So that's my story. Oh, you're muted, Howard.
Yeah, why don't we go into the first page?
All right. Okay.
This is one of my favorite topics, and I actually wrote an article about this that can be found in the QRZ forum, QRZ.com. Excuse me, it was on EHAM. What's the attraction of CW in today's high-tech world? Why would anybody want to do CW, right? Look at the beautiful digital page for FT8. Everything's, colorful and lit up. And then if you look at the picture on the left, I like it because one Indian is sending CW and the other one's sending smoke signals. It's almost like the same technology in a way, right? So what's the attraction? There's many things that are very interesting about CW. When I was younger, and I've been on the air doing CW for 54 years, I was licensed in 1965 when I was 13 years old. There's many times when I wanted to use the radio and I really didn't want to talk. I wanted to do something, but I didn't feel like talking to anybody. I wasn't in the mood. So I found that using CW was a wonderful way of diverting myself and getting my mind off whatever was bothering me, whatever was concerning me in my life. I just couldn't think about it when I was on the air using CW. It was a wonderful release. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that got me to be so interested in it. Now, as far as ham radio goes, I would go back to the first page still, Jim. As far as ham radio goes, the advantages to CW are very interesting. With less power out, you can get out much further than sideband. In field day 2 weeks ago, I had a 5-watt rig down at the beach in the evening, and with a very marginal antenna on top of my car, I was getting out all over to the West Coast of the United States with 5 watts. I couldn't believe it on the first call in a contest. So CW is very effective like that. Also, if you have noisy band conditions or static or QRN, it gets right through. You don't have to worry about concentrating on someone's accent if you can't maybe understand what they're saying. CW is the great equalizer because everybody's using English. So if somebody really can't speak English in Russia, they certainly could send CW and you'll be able to contact with them. And years ago, before the world really opened up as well as it is today, and the Iron Curtain came down, CW was the main way you would get through to some of those countries. So it's a very efficient mode, and with the increase in interest in SOTA and POTA, and I see, Nick, next week you're going to have a presentation on that, CW is the way to go because you can make the transmitters very small and fit into your pocket. I mean, my little 5-watt QRP thing right here, if you can see this thing is like in a go box. And this is the entire radio, if you can see it. 5 watts on this thing, beautiful reception, multi-band, VFO, transmitting all over the West Coast from the East Coast. So Can you do this on FT8? Sure you can, and you can do it very well. Can you do it on all the other digital modes? Sure you can. But it's done by a computer. CW is a language. It's something beautiful to be able to learn, just like Spanish. A little bit more abstract, but it gives you such satisfaction when you can do it. You know, if you like using computers and you don't mind the computer doing all the work for you, then FT8 is for you. If you want something a little bit more individualistic, then CW is also fascinating. Okay, next slide, Jim. Jim, why don't you talk a little bit about how we teach and learning CW, because you being a teacher, you know all about this.
Sure. Well, we have two beginners classes. First one is called B1, where we teach the first 20 characters. And the second one is called B2, or Beginners 2, where we teach the second 20 characters for a total of 40. And we bring you in, and we use a program called G4FON. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it presents the characters in a specific order, starting with K and M, R and S, I believe. And so we're all learning the same characters in the same order. And what we'll do is we'll bring the students in. We introduce them to the characters as an instructor. Then we'll show them how to spend. Then we'll spend 2 minutes at a time in G4FON that'll send the characters that we've introduced in a random fashion. We teach the characters at a 20 word per minute speed for the character, which might sound a little quick to some. But we give 5 word per minute spacing between those characters, which is the Farnsworth method. And the reason we do this is because, and that's not how I learned. You know, I learned it the old-fashioned way with the very slow dits and das, listening to the tapes. But this way, you learn the character as an actual sound rather than counting how many dits and how many das are in each character, because it's going a little bit quicker. And so far, so good. The students really learn very quickly. And I teach a class once a week. And in my class, I introduce three to three characters a week, and then I give them homework to learn one more character during the week until they come back. So we're learning together 4 characters a week. So we get up through the first 20 characters in about 5 or 6 weeks. Of course, once we introduce enough characters and vowels, you know, consonants and vowels to where we can start getting some words, I spend time sending, you know, a lot of words to the students. And then as we get into about the second week, I allow them to start sending back to me. And I'm not, you know, it's not a sending class to where I'm critiquing their sending, but I'm just trying to get them the beginning of the introduction to sending. And that's also helps them learn too. They hear it, you know, they write it down on paper, they see it in their head, and they also send it back to me. So all that combined makes for, that's how we teach the initial characters.
Okay, and the most important thing, as we always teach, is that you can be a professional student of learning all the 40 characters with all the various apps and websites, but the most important thing of all is to get on the air. And that's the focus of our club, getting everybody to be making QSOs and to use the efforts that they put in their labors, because if you don't have that connection between getting on the air and what you learn, you can't really put CW much to use.
Howard, I want to mention one more thing. Is I think the most important thing is that many of us have all tried to learn CW at one time, and many of us you had to learn it to get certain license classes. But this method, where we're learning in a classroom environment all together, we're having a lot of fun. We're joking, we're laughing. We're learning together, and it seems like that when you're learning all together and everybody focused on the same goal, it just seems to go much more smoothly, and it's much more enjoyable at the same time.
Okay, so we're stressing the importance of making QSOs, and as far as the time goes, we recommend people take at least 2 classes of an hour each per week and practice about 15 to 30 minutes a day on their own. Now, what are the best apps and websites? I'm not going to list them for you here, but anybody who comes into the club, and both Jim's and Rachel and Charlie will know, I always ask them a question, well, what apps and websites have you been using to learn CW? And with 700 people getting asked the same question, we have a tremendous compendium of all the available CW apps and websites, and a lot with commentary that people have made of whether they like them or they don't. And we have that in our club file. We have a very big club Dropbox that's chock full of information that's available to all members about all aspects of CW and learning and relevant things to the club. But you know, I will tell you this thing, and just to stress what we're saying about the methods. Sure, you can listen and learn with the new methods, which is Farnsworth, as Jim explained, which they send you the CW fast, character-wise, but slow, spaced out with the reasoning so that you don't memorize or count the dots and dashes. But I learned with this. I still have this 78 record. I learned at 5 words a minute, and then back then we were forced to get on the air immediately as novices and get up to 13 words a minute within 1 year to take our next level, which was general. And if we didn't pass 13 words a minute within a year, we would lose our novice license and we'd have to start from scratch again, and nobody wanted to do it. So there was quite a motivation. But it doesn't even really matter how you learn, it's whether or not you apply what you learn. I always say this, that my kids were great students of Spanish in high school, and they all got A's, but they never used the language. So 2 years later, after high school, if they ever had an opportunity to speak to somebody in Spanish, casually or in a restaurant or in the street, they wouldn't be able to do it, and everything was forgotten. So it's the same thing with CW. Unless you're applying what you learn from the apps and the websites into everyday QSOing, which is the end game, this is really not going to have much meaning to you, and a lot of people will drop out. So we recognize that, and our club is dedicated to teach to the QSO and to get you on the air within 3 to 4 months of you starting with us. Let's go to the next slide, Jim. Okay, this is a big question here. This is a question that always comes up. Well, what do we start out off with, a straight key or a keyer or a bug? And the lower right-hand corner with the blue background is a cootie key. We teach with a straight key, not with a keyer to start. Now, why? Because we feel that if the student has a feel of actually making the letters and formulating themselves, the mind will also be formulating and getting used to thinking that way along, right down through your arm to your hand, instead of having a machine do it for you. So we like people to get proficient up to about 18 words a minute with a straight key, just to about the point that they're ready to do head copy, because at 18 words a minute, it becomes a struggle to write. You're going to get writer's cramp, and you have to really put the pen down to get higher than that. And then we recommend that you can go on to a keyer. And then after that, you go into a bug or a cootie key. A cootie key is just like a straight key on its side. That's how it works. And those special keys can be done when you're really proficient. But if you bring those things early into your practice, we feel that that's going to be an impediment. Now, you can ask 10 people that question, and they might give you different answers. But that's the logic behind the club. Next slide, Jim. This is the biggest thing we have to talk about today, the fear of CW. Now, this is something I never really thought existed before I started teaching. I don't remember being scared of a CW when I was 13 years old. I remember being nervous about, I guess, making my first contact or being excited about it. I remember to this day my first contact, and you know, let me get this for you, for the English audience. Excuse me 1 minute. Sorry to get up in the presentation. I still remember my first QSO with DX, G3OSJ. I still have his card from 1966. Now, I wasn't nervous, I was very excited. Actually, as a sideline, I tried to reach this fellow and I wrote a letter to him a few months ago, but he's no longer in the house, and the woman who was in the house now wrote me back. They were trying to find him, but then COVID hit, and I haven't heard much from them since. So I didn't remember being fearful, but in talking to all the members that have come into the club and hearing people relate their experiencing about learning CW and using it, people are scared. Now, what are they scared of? They're scared of making a mistake. They're scared of not knowing what to do when they get on the air. They're maybe going to be embarrassed in front of people in the class if they don't send right or they don't get it. So from the get-go, 2.5 years ago, we realized that we have to fight that fear and make people feel comfortable in the club and create an atmosphere where everybody's going to be helpful. Nobody will ever criticize anybody else. Nobody will ever show off, and that everybody is going to be in an Elmer position to the next person. And thankfully, that's the atmosphere we've created, and we work on this all the time. When people send the first time and make a mistake in class, one of the first things they say is, "I'm sorry." And what do we tell them, Jim?
Saying I'm sorry is not allowed. You just you just continue on.
That's right. There's no such thing as being sorry in your hobby. What are you going to be sorry about? Nobody's judging. Nobody's giving you a grade. But when everybody does well, especially in the QSO classes, when they make their first QSOs, everybody gives a round of applause. We send out certificates. So what we have in our club is an atmosphere of encouragement, and that's what we do to fight this. And we recognize it, and it's there, and the intimidation is there, and we deal with it in all ways. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Jim. Jim, why don't you talk about the protocol, because this is your baby.
Well, one of the things that, that I mentioned earlier that I was afraid of getting on the air before I had joined the club was, you can learn all the characters, and we get a bunch of students, graduating all the time from B2, and they know all 40 characters, but now what do you do with them? There's a CW protocol that you have to learn. And so we've created a CW protocol reference sheet. And of course, we've probably all seen these, and every club has a version of what they think the way you should be sending back and forth. But we've kind of looked at what all the clubs were using. We drew experience from Howard and from the senior members of the club. And then we created our own protocol sheet, and we've broken the CW QSO down into basically 4 sections, and we call them protocols. Protocol 1 is where we send your RST, your QTH, and your name. And that's generally all that happens in the first section of the QSO before you hand it over to the other guy to do the same thing. Protocol 2 is where you talk about your rig, your antenna, and the weather. And then Protocol 3 is where you kind of get into how long you've been a ham, what your job is, and that's kind of where if you get that far into a QSO, it kind of gets into RAGCHU territory. So that Protocol 3 can go on and on and on. And then what we call Protocol 4 or ending is just that. It's the ending, and it's how do you end the QSO. And I like to tell all my students, because especially when you're new, when you get into a QSO, as soon as you get into it and you exchange that first set of information in Protocol 1, you want it to be done. You want to end it, because you said, I've made it this far, let's just stop it while I'm ahead. And so we teach how to end the QSO in a polite way, and let them know that, you could end it at any time. You don't have to go on and on. You can end it, and we teach that too. That's Protocol 4. So we encourage our students to print out this protocol reference sheet, customize it with their own information in there. And then that's always right next to your rig, especially when you're new. And that's something you can always reference. And that just knowing what you're supposed to send and knowing what's going to be coming back at you, you know that in the first section they're going to be sending you 3 key pieces of information. That takes away so much fear because it takes away a lot of the mystery that was building, that was creating that fear in students in the first place.
What's the name of your class on Thursday nights, Jim?
I do a class once a week called Demystifying the QSO. And my number ones, my students generally are either people who have, generally they're people who've just learned the characters and now they want to start using them. Or I get people that have known the characters but just never learned what that protocol was. And a lot of these things are, just customs and courtesies of, when do you say thank you? When do you say goodbye? When do you exchange this piece of information and that? And which is why we created this worksheet. And we just really work on the protocol. And then we, in that class, we'll do classroom stuff on Zoom for about an hour. And then we'll get on HF and then we'll all practice it with each other for another hour and sometimes more because we're having so much fun. Nobody wants to leave.
Actually, Jim came up with the image here, the back and forth musical image, because what did you refer to the QSO as?
Well, I think it's like I think it's like a dance. You have your moves and they have their moves, and if you do it right, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's why we put that image. Let's go to the next one. I think we're running a little bit longer than I thought. Jim, remind me, how many slides do we have after head copy?
I think there's just one more slide after this one.
Okay, good.
One or two.
I mentioned head copy before. This is what I teach every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock Eastern. That's kind of an inconvenient time for the UK people, though we have 15 UK members in the club already, and some do come to our classes when it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning your time. Head copy is very important if you want to learn speeds above 18 words a minute. You got to put the pen down. So we teach how it's done. And there's nothing on the internet written about how to teach head copy. Most people don't know how to teach it because there's no books about it. What we've done is over the past 2 years from this class, we've gleaned comments and experience from this weekly head copy class and put it together and told our students basically how to get past instant recognition. What's instant recognition? It's where you hear the dots and the dashes in your ear, and maybe you recognize a letter without writing it down, or a word like THE, the. But you have to move that into your mind. I won't go into the details of this. You have to move it into your mind and put it on a ticker tape, just like you see on the bottom of CNN, like a crawl. And make that a repository for what you're hearing, because you're hearing something. What do you do with it? You got to place it someplace. And we start off, you place that on a blackboard, and then hopefully you get to a moving ticker tape. It's a complicated, but it's a very interesting class. And this is what we teach every Tuesday night. Let's go on to the next slides, Jim. Increasing speed. Is it necessary? You won't really find conversational CW any faster anywhere than 30 words a minute on the band, and that'll be mostly Europeans doing that in DX type of QSOs with very quick exchanges without any really rag chewing involved in it. Most rag chewing these days, at least in the United States, would be done, let's say, 18 words a minute and lower, between 10 and 18 words a minute. A very good speed for handling European DX, where they would like to answer you, because there's a lot of Europeans that like to send faster, would be about 24 words a minute. Is it necessary? Well, it all depends what you want to do. But we do have classes that will address how you get to different speeds. There are plateaus between 10 and 18 words a minute. We recognize that people get stuck there, and we have training classes for just that. So out of the 38 classes that we have, we've structured classes to really help people on every stage of their journey of learning CW. Let's go to the next one, Jim. Okay, so we'll stress this again, that there are two tenets of our organization. One is that we teach towards the QSO, not towards the contest. We teach to get people on to be able to make QSOs of various lengths. And we want people to have fun. Jim described some of the things that we do to have fun. People have made tremendous long-term friends, even though none of us have seen each other yet because of the lockdown. We know a lot about each other. I'll give you one little fun thing that we do in our Friday class. We have a class on Friday called Fun Fridays with CW. Well, what do we do there? We have maybe about 10 or 15 people in a class, and we send different things. So we say, okay, we're going to send our favorite foods now. Or we'll send, like we did the other day, what foods we don't like. So I know Jim for a year now, and I know he likes a certain type of steak called tri-tip steak. And sometimes I kid him about it, right? So I went first, and I was to say what food I hate. So I said, I hate tri-tip steak. I was laughing by the time I sent the word try, and I'm looking at everybody else on Zoom and seeing if they're copying it, because I'm sending about 18 words a minute to make sure everybody copy it. And I see everybody start laughing before I sent the word steak, so I knew they got the joke. So it was a lot of fun, and I'll give you one real gringo type of experience. I won't tell you the guy's call sign. But we have one teacher in Thailand. We were going around the room in these fun classes and saying, okay, we're going to do geography. We're going to say, like, where's, like, the Tower of London or something, and then you'll have to say what country it is, right? So the Thai teacher said, where's the Taj Mahal? Typical American didn't know the Taj Mahal was in India, so he said it's the casino in Atlantic City. And that was a blast. I mean, I almost fell out of the chair, you know? Actually, I think the Taj Mahal is maybe owned by Trump. I don't know. But that's the type of fun we have. And then for the students that don't pay attention to their classes, we play this video for them because this is what's going to happen if you don't do your homework and don't pay attention.
It's supposed to play, Howard, but for some reason now it's not playing for me.
Yeah, I don't see the button.
The button disappeared.
How do you like that? The climax here.
Oh, well.
Yeah, we were going to play this video of the Three Stooges here. How do you like that? I built a great crescendo, and we don't have this here. Jim, can you pull up the website very quickly, and then we'll play that? Because I think it's cute.
Oh, the LICW website?
Yeah.
Sure. That'd be good to show anyway.
Yeah. Just go to longislandcwclub.org.
Okay.
I'm sorry that we're ruining the fun out of this whole thing, but I want to show you, that button worked on this PowerPoint when we tested it last night. So go to longislandcwclub.org. Well, you'll get a view of now. Go to galleries. Go to entertaining videos. Page down. There you go. Play this, Jim, and share the screen. So this is what happens when you don't study. You got the sound shared, Jim? I don't hear it.
I do.
No, it's not sharing the sound.
Oh, well, we'll have to learn from this experience.
That should have played. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. We're not going to be able to play this, unfortunately. All right. The best laid plans of mice and men. Well,
we can encourage everyone to go check it out themselves.
It's kind of cute. The Three Stooges are decoding, and then Mo slaps them all when they don't get the right answer on what it's decoding. It's very cute. It should have played. I'm sorry. That's really our presentation, Nick. It ran longer than I thought. We don't rehearse these things. If maybe some of the members that are here, Rachel wants to say what her experience was, and Jim from Oregon wants to say anything, that might be good. If not, you want to turn it over to questions.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. And don't worry at all, Howard, about the little problem you had with the video there. That's life, isn't it? But that was a great presentation, and thanks to both of you. That was very interesting, and I'm sure we've got people with lots of questions and comments they want to make. I'm just going to say myself, Howard, I learned Morse code from a 78 record, same as you, and God knows how, but I did. And at the age of 12, and I hadn't even taken the post office Morse test then, I operated in our National Field Day, and was one of the operators in the club station that I was a member of. And the club, incidentally, the leading member in the club was in the Baldock post office receiving station that used to go looking for all the transgressions of radio amateurs on the shortwaves at the time. Very, very proactive, searching down people that had no right to be doing things. And he thought it was a hoot that a 12-year-old was sending Morse code, not having taken the Morse test. So we've all been there, and it's stayed with me the rest of my life. So I'm going to chuck it out to everyone else. There was an invitation there, Rachel, to you to just say a couple of words, if you don't mind, and also to the other Jim out on the West Coast. So Rachel, over to you first.
Well, I'm not really sure what to say, but it's been absolutely wonderful since I joined, I don't know how long ago, 2 or 3 weeks back. It's still a struggle, I have to say, but very slow progress, but I'll get there eventually. But no, most of the classes I've been to have been absolutely great, and thoroughly enjoying it.
Rachel, what did you think about the ladies' classes?
I haven't been to one, Howard.
Oh, really? That's heresy. You shouldn't tell me that, you know?
Because
I want to go to the ladies' classes, but they won't let me in, so I don't really know who goes, you know?
it's 2 o'clock in the morning here. I'm tucked up safe in bed.
Well, we hope to expand them and you know, have some during the day too.
I would love to go to one. The one I do absolutely love is Friday lunchtime here. Breakfast with Jay.
Oh, Breakfast with Jay. Yeah, Breakfast with Jay.
I love that one.
Eastern class. Yeah, that's a nice class for your time.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoying it. And thank you, Howard.
Well, thank you for joining, and thank you for referring Charlie too. So Charlie, I don't think you've taken a class yet, but we're waiting for you, you know, with open arms.
Oh, yes, she
did
has.
one last night.
Oh, you did one last night?
I did one last night, yeah.
Which one did you go to?
The Rachel will probably know better. The Beginners B, was it Beginners A? One of them.
Beginners
B,
1. Okay, very
B1.
good.
Yeah. It was good. I might drop into some of the intermediates as well to see if I can keep up there.
Okay.
And then sort of float between if I'm able to. But no, it's very good. Very calming. The instructor had a very sort of relaxing voice and sort of real gentle intro. So for my first session, being very, very nervous, especially in a Zoom meet across the pond.
Yeah.
It was a very, very relaxing experience, especially that late at night. I nearly fell asleep through some of it. It was so sort of, you know, it's like mindfulness course. It's sort of very gentle, but no, it was very, very, very good.
Well, I'm glad. I'm trying to remember. You know, it's hard for me to remember who teaches all these classes I look into, but I'll look at the schedule and I'll figure out who taught the B1 class last night when we're talking here.
One thing I would say, I was actually quite surprised by how much information you've got on setting up Zoom. Going through all your files and all your settings, I learnt more from your file about how to work Zoom than I've ever done from YouTube or anything before. I tried CW and Zoom before and it all got filtered out. So I've changed all the settings, set it up, and it's very good now. It works really well now.
Well, I personally can't take any credit for that, Charlie, because we got some very smart people in the club that were on that from the get-go. And they knew what to uncheck because Zoom considers CW as an echo, and they want to cancel that. So they realized right away that when we sent the first letters, it sounded great, and then it disappeared. And so some of the IT guys knew right away, going into the advanced setting, what to uncheck, and we were on that from, I mean, if you try to get information from Zoom, it's a terrific company, and they got some smart people, but you need like an engineering degree to understand their website or their FAQs, and their customer service now, you can't reach them because everybody in the world is using Zoom. So you got to kind of figure these things out for yourself, and we're lucky that some people did.
It did make me wonder whether Zoom should make amateur radios. If they can filter out noise to that level, they'd make great DSP filters.
Well, you want to know something? In the head copy class, we were just talking about this last night. I encourage people not to use any filters.
Mm.
If you really want to learn CW, you keep your filters wide open at 2400 hertz and never turn them down to 500. But that's another story.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. The other Jim from Oregon, I think, do you want to come in on your experiences?
Yeah, sure. Welcome from the West Coast. Anyway, I came in on March 10th after about a month of going stir crazy due to the virus, like everybody else. And my wife and I are both retired, so she's looking at me like, you need to do something. And she was absolutely right. Years ago, I got my license in 1971. And like everybody else, 5 words a minute was required for the first license. Like you, I had the record and some tapes. And it was quite easy to get to 5 words a minute. It was not learned properly, though. Even when I got later on to 13 words a minute, and then on to 20 words a minute for my extra class, you have much more of a struggle if you don't learn it properly from the beginning, building good foundations. And the thing I really appreciated about this club is that there are so many folks with expertise and have pondered this much more than I, and have adapted the best practices, I think, into one program. It really works well. Like Howard is saying, head copying, that's something I never tried to do before. And you simply can't write that fast. Eliminating those types of things has helped a lot. And I don't know. Yeah, it's awfully hard pressed to find a program that is more robust, I think, for lack of a better word, than this. Right now I'm twisting arms for my grandchildren to get them into, we have a new reset on the 20th of July for our children's classes. And so I've got some grandchildren and a nephew that are interested. So I got a feeling Grandpa's going to be building some oscillators here shortly. But anyway, back to you. And anyway, good luck with your journey in CW.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jim. Right. Anyone got a question or point that wants to they want to put to Howard and Jim tonight? Who wants to go first? Yeah, go on. Richard first, then Gerald. RBG.
Yeah, I was just unmuting. Yeah, good evening, Howard and Jim, and thanks very much indeed. I had a 41-year gap from the hobby, and when I came back to the hobby 15 years ago, picking up CW was a little bit like riding a bike. You don't really forget it. And I've gone from operating CW, rag chewing and what have you, and I've ended up a keen contester, and I do a lot of portable for worldwide flora fauna, and CW is my main mode. So I've perhaps got a little bit lazy. I use N1MM for contesting and the same for my portable operations. Have you a class that would get me away? My receiving speed is good. I do contesting about 25 words a minute, so I don't have problems. recognising letters and names and things. But obviously my sending has suffered because I'm doing it with a keyboard. What can you offer me?
Oh, that's a good question. We have sending classes. Every Monday night, there's a sending class just for this. And sending is a part of every one of our other beginner classes too, and intermediate. There's basically sending in all our classes. But there's one particular class during the week that's 100% dedicated to sending. But besides this, if you were in our club, Rich, if you wanted to practice your sending with anybody, you can get on our group's IO and make a message and say, hey, I want to get on and practice my sending now. Is anybody around? You'll get a handful of people who will say, okay, let's do it. And we have two Zoom channels. We use one for 95% of our classes, one for the overflow, and for, one-on-one meetups or small group meetups like this under what we call the buddy system. So you would be able to get plenty of practice, and there will be every Monday night an advanced teacher to be able to comment on your sending. As a matter of fact, another thing we're experimenting right now, there is a computer program that will read your sending and tell you how you're doing space-wise and formation-wise. And we're thinking about commercializing this in the club too.
Howard, just I wanted to mention that just for a little bit more detail, we have basic sending courses. I think John St. John and some others does those. We have breaking the 15 word per minute barrier sending class. We have a 2020 sending class where the goal is to reach 20 words per minute by the end of 2020. And that'll keep going, I'm sure, from year to year. But then we have a 20 plus sending class where you're trying to send beyond 20. So all kinds of different sending classes. And what I think is the best thing, I don't know if you've all heard of a club called CW Ops, and they offer all kinds of sending courses. And what I'd like to call our club is the low stress alternative to CW Ops, because you're not tied in. With CW Ops or some of these other courses, you sign up, you got to go to every class, you can't miss one, you got to do your homework. But with ours, you drop into any class you want to at any time. If you feel like that it's not right for you, or if you don't have the time, you just don't show up. There's no retribution. There's nothing wrong with just bouncing around and going. And if you find a class that you really like, of course you go to it as much as you can. But I like the fact that you have the freedom to really drop into any of these different classes, see which one works for you, and then you can pick the ones that you like and continue to go.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. So if you miss a few classes, then how do you go back and catch up again?
Well, it depends on which type of class you're in. Go ahead. What are you going to say, Howard?
Yeah, I would. Once you finish, Jim.
I was just going to say that a lot of these classes are just ongoing. There's really no catching up, but we just continue to work together, and we'll bring you back up to where we are. Some classes might be cyclical, might be in a 6 week, might recycle and reset after 6 weeks, but some of these just continue to go on. So
if you're practicing on your own, Rich, the classes are not to replace practicing on your own 15 to 30 minutes a day. The classes are showing you the next letters or the way to go, or where the goalposts are. But you still need to have your independent study on a daily basis. And if you miss the class, it's okay. But if you're practicing on your own, you'll be all right.
I think the best experience I had with increasing my skill in sending and comprehension was, of course, going to the classes and getting on the air, and of course doing that. But you'll meet people, and I've made some really good friends just in the year and a half I've been in the club. And some of those friends I met just by reaching out to saying, hey, does anybody want to practice once a day or 3 times a week or something like that? And then I would find somebody, we'd meet in Zoom, and an hour a day, 3 days a week, we practice together. And that's really the time outside the classes where you really get that improvement. And then you make friends. It's a win-win all the way around.
Thanks very much indeed. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Gerald.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Jim. It was really interesting that I did CW way back in '63. Rich will remember, I think. I took the 12 word a minute then, and where you had to actually write down every letter, because the guy who was watching you receiving was watching that you copied everything down correctly. It takes a bit of to break that habit, and even on voice, I tend now to be making notes as people are talking on a QSO before I reply, because I forget things as well. Perhaps it's an age-related thing, but is there any quick tricks for this thing about getting the tape going through your brain? And do you write any jottings down?
Well, you know, at the speeds that we train for head copy, which is above 20 words a minute, Gerald, you can't write at that speed. You can, but it's going to be a mess, and you're going to get writer's cramp. So, you know, it's something you're not going to be able to do comfortably. Yeah, at 15 words a minute, 12 words a minute, you can write. But at the speed we teach head copy, you got to move on to the next level. And that's where the class is dedicated, for those students who are already knocking on the door at 20 words a minute. And then we start talking about the theory and how to do it. And actually it comes from my personal experience and how I decode in my head. There was no other place to do it but to like debrief myself.
Yeah. But Gerald, I think you've already know one of the secrets that you kind of mentioned is that, yes, for the majority of the things you're listening to, you're head copying them. But of course, if an important piece of information comes by that you want to talk about, maybe on your turn, the type of radio or something about he said about a hobby or something, you do jot those little things down, and that way they'll be there on your paper that you can refer to whenever it's your turn to go back. But of course we're not writing everything down. We're just writing down just the bits and pieces. You know, you're going to write down the things that are going to go in your log, of course. But then anything else that's of interest, but majority of the stuff you're not going to need to write it down.
Oh, thank you. That's good. I'm just worried that I might lose track of the next bit that's coming while I'm jotting down the notes, but I'll keep trying.
You know, Gerald, a head copy is not something that's going to come right away.
Yeah, I've been listening every day on the radio to try to copy the QSOs that's going on CW to get back into it again. And,
head copy, even if you're at 20 words a minute, could take months before it sinks in. Months. It really depends.
Not just me then.
It depends how active. We had one guy, and this is like CW Extreme. We had one fellow, K2MZ, join the club last October without a license. He wasn't licensed yet. 2,000 plus QSOs later, and 5 months later, he became an instructor of the kids, and he's head copying at 24 words a minute. That's total, like that's CW, you know, at high, you know, just going full gate. He put hours and hours and hours in it, and he did it. Now, how many people can afford the time or have the interest to do something like that? Not that many. So the learning curve just goes down in proportion to time. If you were going to do it every day like he did, yeah, the average person in 4 or 5 months would head copy. You're going to, you know, make this casual and a more fun type of thing. It could take years, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I've got the idea. I'll actually try and check into your group and find out a bit more practice.
Yeah, we at the very least, and what I say to the students that come into the head copy class, at least we show you where the end game is, where the goalpost is. The goalpost is here. You're at 15 words a minute now. At least you know where to go. You're not confused of what do I do next. This is the road. You want to take it, we'll get you there. You want to get off the road and stay there, that's fine too.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gerald. Anyone else with a question or comment to Howard and Jim? And if I don't see you, it's because I've got 2 screens of pictures here, and do wave or just dive in if you want to.
Can I just comment on Gerald, what Gerald was saying?
Yeah, of course, can, Richard.
Yeah. One of the problems, Gerald, is if you try to write it down and you miss a letter, then you don't go any further because you're worried about what was the missing letter. and trying to understand the word. And that's why you've got to get it in your head. And you hear it like a musical note. You know, da is A, and you just hear an A. And it's like that when you're doing high-speed contesting. You hear the musicality of a call sign. You might not have it typed on your keyboard, and it's still coming through, and you just hear the musicality of that call sign before you lay it down on your keys.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That's good. On to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Darren, you made a little comment on the chat box saying, and I know because you're not a CW operator at all, and you weren't sure about whether you were going to come tonight, but you've really enjoyed it. Go on, just say a couple of words.
Yeah, okay. There, I'll open myself up a little bit here now, and I'll be honest. When I learned CW, I had no problem learning it. It was hard work, and I put the hours in. And I got there, but it was mainly because you were writing down what you received, and you were sending from text that was in front of you. My problem with CW is I am slightly dyslexic, and you could throw a 5-letter word at me now, and it would not sink in. If you said five letters to me, it wouldn't sink in, and that's what really held me back and stopped me progressing with CW. I am a keen contest operator, and I would love to be able to do it up to contest standards. But because I could not, I'm almost certain I would not be able to take a call sign in my head in Morse code. Yet I can if somebody sent it me phonetically. So that's where I'm from. But yeah, it's been an absolutely fantastic evening. And I do think that if the methods that are used here on Zoom were around 30 years, I need to say 20 years ago, in fact 40 years ago when I did my exams, it may well have stuck in and got there. But it's that question, isn't it? Do you really have the time? That was the word that was mentioned earlier, to get back up to the standards that were needed. Be interested in the Long Island guys just coming back on the dyslexia side of things. Have you come across that before?
You know, we have a number of people in the club that have come in with various issues and disabilities. There was one man who was injured as a Marine, and he lost some of his memory, and he was a radio operator in the service. And parts of his head copy is there and parts aren't. So I've been working with him, and he's doing well. If you're interested in contests, we have a contest class every week where we play a contest trainer, and we teach people how to decode at various speeds, even with QRM, so that you can actually do the contesting. So I don't really think that being dyslexic, which is, you know, I think more of a visual thing than a hearing thing. I believe that with proper training, we could probably, and if you put in the time, we could probably identify where the connections need to be made, and we can figure it out and help you with that.
Howard, I'd like just to mention too that when I first started taking your head copy class, you know, that head copy is absolutely a learned skill. Just learning how to retain enough characters in your head to build a word. When we first started the class, because I started right when we first started that head copy class, Howard might send you 4 characters, and by the time you got to the 4th character, you couldn't remember what the first 2 characters were, right? Let alone make a word out of it. And so that's what we worked on. We just did a few characters and a few characters, and then pretty soon they, through practice, they started to stick. And then we did words. And then we would start to be able to hold words, and then he would send 2 words. And then when you got to the second word, you couldn't remember what the first word was. But through practice over and over again, it started to stick. And then that built into full sentences, and then multiple sentences. So I think that it can come to everybody, but it doesn't come to anybody. Well, maybe it comes to a few people easy, but it sure didn't come to me easy. And it's something, I've been in that head copy class for over a year, and I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm sure I'm a lot farther ahead than when I started.
Well,
I
Jim,
also wanted to say that head sending. I'm a terrible speller. I don't give it the public school system. I don't know what to blame it on. I didn't read enough as a kid, but you know, I have to really work on. The last thing you want to do is to be sending a word and then pause in the middle of a word to figure out how to spell it, and then the person receiving you hears that pause and thinks you've started a new word, and it makes it difficult for them. So we do a lot of work on head sending as well as head copying. We do head sending, and the same thing. You start off with a couple letters, then you build that into a word. But all these things come just through practice. And I think that no matter where you are or what your situation is, I think that through constant practice and through encouragement of the other club members who are all working towards the same goal, it can be done.
you know, I'll tell you one more thing about head copy. I'm taking this class very seriously because it's very cerebral, you know, in a lot of ways. And there's one scientific study of which we have in our club file where it says that learning CW creates white matter pathways in the brain. A very interesting study. But recently we've gotten a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, a handful of blind hams into the club because we reached out to that community. And blind hams, Darren, have to copy in their head. Because what's the sense of writing something down, right? And we've been comparing notes with every member who joins who's blind, how they do that. And nobody's ever asked them this question before, just like nobody ever asked me how I had copied 2 years ago when I started this. Because we just did it, we never thought about it. And we're comparing notes between the sighted people and the unsighted people and bringing that into the class to teach. It's fascinating. So if you want to do this, I'll work with you and we'll break this down and figure out what you need. Because I'm very interested in the cerebral part of this, Darryl.
Yeah, okay. That's, as a whole evening, it's been thoroughly interesting. The one other thing on the same subject, really, we talk about writing it down. As I'm looking to do more contest side of it, if I was to pursue it any further, I would really be looking to go straight to a keyboard rather than pen and paper. Would that make more sense?
Well, for a contest, you need to be on a keyboard. I mean,
yeah.
I once did a contest, the first 2 hours of a field day a few years ago on a keyboard, and my 66-year-old wrist was bothering me for the next week. So I wouldn't dare do that again. So you're doing, you know, 70 to 150 QSOs per hour. You need to be on a keyboard or you're going to be hurting, you know, at our age, right? But as long as you can send on a straight key or with a keyer, I don't mind that. But you'll see that many people in ham radio who are doing very high speed contests with a keyboard, if you ever hear them come off the keyboard, they can't send. So yeah. The keyboard is just another skill, providing you know the base skills, which is starting off by hand sending, going into a keyboard, keyer, and then you can go into a keyboard or anything else you want to do. But you got to learn how to walk before you run, because then if you ever have to walk, you can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes back to what Richard said earlier. He's got out of the habit of actually sending with the key. Yeah, thank you very much. Very good.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I'll be thinking about your question later. I mean, nobody asked me about a dyslexic thing. I'm really interested in this type of stuff, as you can see.
One brief comment I might interject is, you know, when I mentioned earlier that learning the wrong way by counting dits and dahs was slowing me down later on, and looking at head copy, I guess part of it is between that and actually listening to things on the air, but head copy requires that you start listening to rhythms of letters, not the individual dits and dahs, not breaking it down that far. It's like listening to music. If you're listening to music, you listen to a phrase of music, but you don't listen to the individual notes. You listen to a riff, or you listen to many notes maybe that comprise a chord. And I think it's much the same. An example is Howard does a thing on Wednesdays, which you'll be doing today, QSO class, and he does 2 of them. And I participated in one of those, and I was way faster than my comfort level at that point. But eventually I got to where I could certainly recognize my call sign, even if it was at 30 words a minute. My call sign has a unique rhythm to it. And I think that was kind of an eye-opener for me, that each character that you listen to has a rhythm unique of its own. So if you're following me, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but that was kind of my take on it, and it kind of comprises the whole thing. So, all right.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, John, G8JMB. Need to unmute, John. John, can't hear you. Need to unmute.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Very interesting talk. Thank you very much. I've tried quite hard to learn CW, about 4 occasions. I get up to 80% of 5 words a minute, and that's it. I can't get beyond that point. I also have a problem with music in that I cannot reproduce a tune. I can tell you if a note's wrong, but I cannot reproduce a tune. I wonder if this is linked.
You know, we haven't had anybody yet, John, that put in the time that didn't get past 5 words a minute. First of all, we don't teach at 5 words a minute. We're teaching with this Farnsworth method, which has the character speeds at 20 words a minute, spaced at 5 words a minute. So you're really not listening to a very slow CW like that would put you to sleep. You're listening to, this is a very slow CW that moves like that, you know?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Totally different.
Or what I had been doing.
Yeah. And
I went to local classes and they transmitted a reasonable speed, but spaced out.
Right, that's the theory behind this. Now, as we talked before, when I held up the record, and Nick learned from a record too, can you learn from a 78 record? I always tell this story. So when I was 13 years old, I'm sitting in the living room listening to the 78 record for 30 days, every day, like a half an hour. And my dad was a B-17 bomber radio operator. As a matter of fact, he was stationed in Polbrook, which I visited a few years ago, wrote a whole story about his experience. He was shot down over Berlin, being stationed in Polbrook. So I turned around and said, you know, Dad, I said, I'm never going to learn this. All I'm doing is memorizing the record. And then day 31, it clicked in, and I never looked back, and here I am today. So you just got to keep at it. And if you're in a like-minded community where you got people to help you with these plateaus or make sure you're on the right track, John, you'll be better. Learning CW on your own is a lonely, boring thing, and most people drop out. But if you have friends and you're in a class like this, and I've never met Jim personally, both Jims, Jim in California, I speak to him every day. It's like I know him like one of my best friends, and he's one of my closest confidants in running the club. The best ideas that I come up with are after the class in a brainstorming session where Jim and a few others, and I think Jim in Oregon has been in some of these things, where we decide what we're going to do and what classes we're going to have and what direction we're going to go. That's a whole different experience than sitting there with a record or just 5 words a minute, John. And this is available now because of Zoom. This wasn't available 2 years ago.
Yeah, I say I have been to classes in the past with some local amateurs who were very helpful, but it didn't help. I get so far and stop. And I say I have certain problems with musical ability. I can't dance either. And I'm just wondering if there's some interconnection there.
I can't answer that, John, and I wouldn't answer that because we're talking about answering how you're going to fail. I'm going to tell you how you're going to succeed.
Okay, well, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, John. Roger, you have said.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, Howard, Jim, and the other Jim. Really interesting what you said there. I wonder, like many, I lapsed from radio. I did the 12 words a minute many years ago, and then forgot about it the day after, and had about a 35-year gap. I wonder if you notice in the classes the take up, whether the youngsters pick it up so much quicker. And like you said, I was going to ask you about the older people, there's some advantage to people, you know, the mental stimulation, etc., etc. But I wondered about the difference between old and young, if you've noticed that.
Oh yeah, we've noticed it, Roger. I mean, if you come into the look, you can go onto our website, which we just showed you before, which is longislandcwclub.org. Under the navigation bar on the top has all the subjects. We tried to get you the Three Stooges video, which you can watch later. It's under galleries and entertaining videos. But the kids program there has 2 videos of these kids sending CW. One is 8, one is 11. That's 2.5 months of work. 2.5 months of work. They're fully proficient. And one of them, who's 11 years old, a girl, she made 7 QSOs into Europe in my QSO class 3 weeks ago. So in the QSO class, Roger, I'm telling them, okay, you know, there's an LZ1HR, you know, he's ready, he's signing, go now. So she goes, and then he comes back and answers her, and I say, okay, Karina, you're in, and now send, you know, RST, QTHNA. She's not even listening to me. I realize that she's not listening to me. She already knows the protocol. I don't even have to say anything anymore. 11 years old. Now, you can't compare that fresh mind with today. That's amazing stuff, and it's so inspiring. But then again, people look. The majority of people in ham radio, as you know, on either side of the Atlantic is 60 plus, at least 50 plus. Our club is you know, got a lot of people in that category too. But because they're coming in and enjoying themselves and having fun, they're learning. Some are learning quicker than others, but they're all advancing every month. But it doesn't really matter because nobody's grading them and nobody's telling them they got to have 25 words a minute by today. I don't really care as long as they're in it, and then they're excited about it, and then they get their grandkids into it and their friends, and then we get them in the kids class. We got 100 kids we're teaching now since March. So
Yeah.
one thing feeds to another.
Yeah, I think at the
So
time when I did it, I think I saw it partly as a challenge as well. It was, you know, I saw it as a personal challenge. It's another skill I could learn. It would come in handy. I did it for the license condition, but it would be. I think I've thought about it recently. I thought I really want to get back into this, and it's been really interesting. So thank you very much. It's been really good. Thank you.
One of our top CW operators is 88 years old. He's in the club. He's a friend of mine, W2TE. We had another guy, let's listen to this story. There was another guy that's 81 years old, right? I didn't know he was 81. So I gave him the typical blurb. I said, do you want to be, you know, here's the different things, and most people want to choose life member. He comes back to me, I can't really think about a life membership. I let him in as an honorary. 81 years old, wanting to learn CW. What do I need his money for, you know? And the guy's in class, he's doing great. He's doing great. So it's all ages.
Yeah, no, really.
Put in the time, you'll get something out of it.
Thank you.
Just
Yeah,
a
brilliant.
point,
Great. Thanks, Roger.
Could I just raise a point, Nick?
Yeah, go on, Ken. Far away.
Right. Okay. I'm G4VZV, Ken, and thanks very much, Howard and Jim. Just want to say my father is 88. He's G4NQL, and although he doesn't actually send CW, in fact, he very rarely goes on air at the moment, but he still listens to his Dayton Morse tutor and still practices looking at car number plates while he's the passenger in my mum's car, and he says it keeps his brain active, just trying to work out and remember things like registration number plates. But that's one point I just wanted to mention. The other side of the coin is I was listening on CW about 3 months ago on the 40 meter band, and should I hear calling CQ, but a guy that lives close to me, and I thought, CW, this guy, what's he doing on CW? But I listened to him, and his Morse was perfect. In fact, I couldn't fault it. But when I later spoke to him on the local VHF band,
he said, oh, and what I do is I use a computer system with, like you said, with the keys on a keyboard, and I send CW that way, and I receive CW. And I thought, if I was going to have a QSO with him, I would feel a little bit cheated. If he's on a machine and it's been played back to him, and he's doing it and sending it, where I'm doing it on a straight up and down key. And that is a little bit, it's a bit of a put off for me, because I don't like to feel cheated if I'm on there talking to a computer, not to a man pressing a key up and down. But that's the downside of it. That's my thoughts.
Well, you know, you've made two very interesting points here, Ken. Nick, do we have time? Is there any time limit?
There isn't, but you know, keep going. There's no problem, Ed.
You know, Ken, would you please send your dad to me? I would like to give him an honorary to come to the club. That's such a wonderful story. One of the things that we talk about, some of the old timers, actually, the guy who does the sending class, Rich, RBG, John W2JSJ, he always talks about looking at license plates and things in the New York City subway system and sounding it out in CW, just like Ken's dad is doing, you know? That's old school, that's cute. I think, you know, for a man 88 still doing CW, I'd love to see him in the club and come in classes, and he would be our guest, and honor to have him. Okay, this is a sensitive subject, what you've raised, Ken, computerized CW. What's my take on this? On one hand, I'll take any type of CW to keep the bands full of CW. I think if you said we're passing a law that nobody could use a code reader or nobody could use a computer to send, in certain circumstances, you might not hear a certain percentage of people on the bands anymore. And, you know, CW is in a little bit of a trouble over the past few years because they eliminated from license requirements, and then, you know, people got involved with cell phones and with the internet, and not a lot of young people came into the hobby. And, you know, CW was dying on the vine until a couple of clubs such as ourselves came and started to promote it. We're delighted that there's a tremendous resurgence and interest in this amongst young people. I didn't mention that in my presentation, you know, what's the attraction of CW and high-tech wear, but we're delighted to see that people like the retro-ness, I should have said this, of CW. The vintage appeal to it, the fact that it isn't, you know, a cell phone like this, and it's not electronic, it's somewhat like the old days, and it works great. I think maybe people, especially being locked down with this COVID thing, are starting to realize going back to their roots and, you know, enjoying simple pleasures just like gardening. Maybe people realize that, you know, enough with this electronic stuff. So yeah, is it a little bit disappointing? Yes, but I'll live with that to keep the activity. But we don't teach in any format with computers. We don't encourage decoders, but I understand where you're coming from, Ken, but we put so many people, you know, on the air in the conventional way at this particular point with approaching 800 members that doesn't bother me too much. Did I answer your question in a kind of a roundabout way?
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate what you've said, Howard, and I appreciate what you mentioned regarding my father. Yeah, that's good. Yes, I can understand what you're saying. It's just from my angle. From me personally, I do go on CW, not as often as I should do, I have to be honest with you, but I do go on, and I use a straight up and a down key, and I love doing it when I do go on. It's just that when I think that this guy doesn't even know one letter of CW, yet he comes back on a computer, and I just think, you know, it goes a bit against the grain, shall we say.
I know, Ken, but it's better that he's on the air than not. And then you can always find someone. You can hear someone who's on a computerized keyboard and someone who's sending by hand, or someone who's sending from a keyer, and you can pick and choose who you want to deal with. And most people that are sending on a keyboard are in fast DX or contest situations. They're not rag chewing. So you can find the type of person that you want to talk to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Howard.
It's a good question, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Right, anyone else got a question before we call this part of the meeting tonight? Yeah, Tristan. Tristan, you need to unmute. So.
Hello, 1, 2. Good evening to can you hear, everybody can hear me?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, very good evening to you there. Where's he gone? I've lost him, sorry. Where is he?
I'm here if you're talking to me, Tristan.
Sorry. Good evening, Howard. This is Tristan here. Thank you very much for to you and Jim for your presentation. Very much learned something. But CW is a good thing, and like Darren was saying, you know, getting to grips with the letters and the word, the noise, the sound, and grasping it, and it's something that is not required anymore. But I have many amateur radio friends who are CW operators. Some now are not silent key, but and I couldn't believe they were having a QSO at 60 to 70 words a minute, and they were tapping the key at that speed, and I thought that's immaculate, you know. And like you say, Ken's dad at the age of 88. Now that is an achievement for an elderly gentleman, and and CW is a nice way of gaining more confidence, and I'm sure I will take your lead with you and Jim on learning about the Morse, if that's okay with you.
We'd love to have you, Tristan, and you know, just country-wise, I see Tom in South Africa, I see Jeff in Belgium, and Tristan, I think you're somewhere in the Balkans, if I remember correctly. I can't see it on your call sign, right?
No, I'm not in the Falklands. I'm in a little, as everybody knows, I'm a little Welshman in the West Wales, United Kingdom. I'm in the Welsh.
Actually, I don't think we have anybody in Wales in the club yet. We have Scotland and England. We don't have and Ireland. We don't have Wales. Come to think of it, it's interesting.
Oh well, maybe you could put me on the map then.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that. We have 15 countries. It's like I'm doing a de-expedition around here.
Anyway,
I'm keeping my fingers that Tom ZS and Jeff ON will join. Not to put pressure on you guys.
No, but anyway, thank you very much for your valid presentation to the Denbydale Club, and I'm sure Nick will not be paying me more for saying more on that. Anyway, thank you very much.
I love your accent, Tristan. You're going to go over big in the club, you know?
Oh, well, Nick will be there before me. Anyway, over to you, Nick. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Tristan. Right, anyone else? Yeah, Darren again.
Yeah, sorry. First of all, we've had a whip round. We're trying to send Tristan down to the Falkland Islands, but we haven't quite raised enough yet. Sorry, Tristan. I just had a conversation with my good lady here, who is also an A-class licensee in the UK, about, you know, shall we have a go at this? Shall we get CW back again? And she says she suffered from tinnitus and she simply couldn't do it anymore. I wonder if you've come across that sort of situation before, and have you any ideas?
This is an issue. I have a good friend, Sam, in the club, one of the charter members, who has that tinnitus, and it bothers him greatly. I don't know for a fact, Darren, if it's inhibiting his CW or not. Because he's the only one that I know out of the, you know, almost over the 700 members we have that has told me they have that issue. But he didn't do well in CW, but I don't know really. I don't have a scientific experiment to know if that was the case or not.
I have
So-
tinnitus, Howard.
Oh, you do, Jim?
Yeah, 30 years in the Air Force, working out on the flight line. I definitely got tinnitus.
I didn't. You never told me that.
But no, it doesn't. In fact, I like when you have, for me, having tinnitus, you want to hear other sounds to kind of cover up the background ringing. And so for me, the CW it doesn't bother my CW at all.
How do you like that? Well, there's your answer.
I'm sure there's varying degrees, but for me, it's not a problem.
I mean,
I
listen,
just thought she filtered me out on purpose, but maybe not.
you know, Darren, if she wants to come into the ladies' class on Saturday to see what it's all about as a guest, just shoot me an email and we'll get her in and she can check it out. I mean, then again, I know the time is inconvenient, but if she wants to see any class, she's welcome. Then she can know firsthand if she can hear or not.
You know, in rigs today, you can really vary the tone to a tone that's more pleasant to you. You can go high or low. You can change the frequency.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Gerald.
Yeah, just another quick one on behalf of another amateur who's disabled. He can't use his hands. Do you know if there's any way of him being able to speak it on a computer so that it would send? It'd be pretty good on receive because he did that, but he can't send because he can't use his hands. Would it be possible? Is there any programs out there which allow him to speak into the computer and it will do the sending?
Boy, I'm sure there are, or we could have these things written because my friend that I just told you with the tinnitus, he just wrote a program for the blind so that they would hear FT8 from their computer without having to touch any dials, and they would know what to do. So I'm sure we could, with voice recognition today, I'm sure we could get voice recognition converted in a computer to a CW. This is fascinating. You know, I'll tell you what I'm interested in. I mean, you know, I've been at this for 54 years. Gerald, do I need another QSO? No, right? I got like 340 countries. I don't need that. But what I really like doing is helping people with CW. You know, there's so many aspects. You have the blind people. Nobody's really reaching out to them. Here's a case of a man who can't use his hands, or somebody who has tinnitus, right? I mean, it makes you feel good when you do something like that. So that, I mean, I would be delighted to find the answer for this. I really would.
Can I point out, Google Keyboards do actually do a CW keyboard under the accessibility section. So I would assume if Google already has the ability to do CW, you might find a way of connecting the Google voice recognition with the Google CW keyboard.
Yeah, it's worth a try that. Thank you. Thank you both of you for your suggestions there. By the way, could I just ask Jim what part of W6 is from? Because my son's in California, near San Francisco.
Oh, that's where I am. I'm in a town called Walnut Creek, not too far from Oakland or Berkeley.
Yes.
Oh, do you know it?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 20 miles east of San Francisco.
Yeah, I've been there. Right, so back on to
next time you're visiting, give me a call.
Yeah, we can't do it because of the coronavirus thing, but I will be out there as soon as it stops.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, brilliant. Okay, I can't see anyone else waving at me, so I'm going to first of all ask our members to give a round of thanks to Howard and Jim in the traditional way for a very, very interesting talk this evening. So thank you guys. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I know everyone else did. So thank you.
Well, you know, thanks for having us, Nick. You have a very congenial group here. This is a very, very nice group that you've created, and I really have to applaud you because I personally know what it takes to do this, to manage this, to organize this, and to run this. I mean, I know. I mean, I'm doing this 10 hours a day. My wife wants to shoot me already, you know? So this is great, and this is the future of ham radio, and you got it, Nick, you know? And this is, I think, got a nice crowd here. I mean, I was wondering, Nick, and I don't want to overwhelm you, but you have this soda POTA thing or POTA coming next week. Could I send some of my club members to see that? Because we're starting a POTA class as of next Saturday, a forum.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to see them. So,
I mean, but if like 20 people came, is that too much for you? Or I mean,
no, almost certainly not. You'll be okay.
Okay, because this is cozy. I don't want to overstay our welcome, you know?
No, we'd love to see them. We really would. We've enjoyed, I have to say to you, Howard, we started this off at the end of March when we had the lockdown in the UK and for the club members. And I just wrote off to everyone I vaguely knew or had heard of and said, will you come and speak at the club? And I didn't have a single person turn me down. It grew into weekly meetings, very immediately into weekly meetings. And it's just been fantastic. And one of the points I just wanted to make was, and I think it ties into what Darren was saying earlier, we've all been introduced in these meetings to things we've never tried before or never thought we'd be interested in. And it's given us a bit of an insight into it, whether that was, you know, the guy with amateur television, the guy who's into moon bounce, you know, all the different, you know, obviously CW with Dan Romanchuk a couple of weeks ago, now yourself, but lots of other aspects of the hobby. And, you know, even for those of us that have been in the hobby for a long time, it's absolutely great to be inspired and think, actually, I'm going to give that a go. I've never tried that before. Gerald, you're nodding. You're older than me. And that's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, could I just have a quick word on that? If the guys who want to check in part of the CW club, could you ask them on the title where they put the name and call sign or whatever, just put CW after it so that we can recognise who they are when we're calling them into the group?
Got it. Well, that's very kind of you, and I'll announce it to the club next week, and we'll see who comes. I mean, 2:30 in the afternoon is a little bit short time-wise. Some people are going back to work now, so I don't know what type of crowd we'll get. But you know, if we get a handful, it'll be fine. And you know, all of you are welcome to join the Long Island CW Club if you're interested. The website is longislandcwclub.org. longislandcwclub.org. Just go to the membership page, and I'll answer within 24 hours, I promise.
Okay, thank you very much, Howard. That's really, really nice of you, and we'll look forward to seeing them next week. And I need to have a conversation with you as well, Howard, because I'm working with the GQRP Club here to turn their convention in September to an online convention. And one of the things we wanted to do was to run an online build-a-thon. But unfortunately, we came to the conclusion last weekend, we didn't have any volunteers who had either had experience of doing it online or a suitable project that we could do. And my ears perked up when you mentioned the antenna for QRP and the antenna matching unit. And I would very much like to talk to you about who's doing that and seeing if it's at a reasonable time, come in and have a look myself and see whether the person who's doing it for you will come and do it for the GQRP Club in what is going to be an international convention, because the GQRP Club has got quite a few hundred members in the States, and the little working group we've got working on the convention includes one of their guys from the East Coast and one from the West Coast in the States on our working group that's planning all the different speakers and different meetings that we've got. So I very much want to have a conversation with you in the next few days about that.
Well, how about we do this one step better, Nick? Why don't you come to the Build-a-thon, which is this Saturday at 1400 UTC. I'll send you the meeting code, and you come in and watch it forever how long you want. I'll introduce you to the teacher, W2XS, John, and you'll see how we handle this.
Brilliant. No, that would be absolutely brilliant, Howard. Thank you. Right. On that note, we don't actually close our meetings. We close the formal bit of the meeting, and I go off and get a drink and grab a bit of fruit or something, because it's quite tiring, as Howard and Jim will know, when you're chairing a meeting and trying to keep an eye on on the chat and everyone what's going on. But I'd just like to say a big good evening to everyone. We are meeting next week. We do have Michael, who is going to be talking to us about his activities on Summits on the Air and Parks on the Air, and the QRP radios and Kias that he uses when he goes walking up in the hills. So again, all those that have tuned in tonight, you're very welcome to join us next week, same time, same Zoom ID, and any friends you want to invite. So on that note, I'm going to close the formal bit of the meeting.